Hello everyone and welcome back to the YellowDog 3D Tips blog. Today I'm going to be showing you how you can relight your 3D render without having to render it again using just 2D render passes. So quite often when we're working in 3D, we'll produce a render that we think we're happy with and looks good to us, but the client sometimes comes back to us and says, can this area be a little bit lighter, or can you change the colour of the light here? Typically a change like that would cost you a re-render, which will usually cost you a lot of time. There is a way, however, that you can save yourself from the dreaded re-render, and you can just do this all in 2D afterwards. So there are some render passes that we need. If you didn't set these up in the first place with your original render, not a problem, because we can render them out really quickly. I'm just using Maya because I find it easier, but you can do this from any 3D package. So here I've got my 3D scene, and all I've done is removed all the lights and all the textures from the scene and just textured everything with a single Lambert texture, which is just a basic texture. And what I've actually done is change the renderer to MentalRay, and you should have this if you have Maya. It comes with every version of Maya. And I've removed all the lights and everything just so that we get a nice fast render. You're talking probably 5 seconds a frame, and we don't have to do the lengthy render again. So in order to get these render passes, what you need to do is open up your render settings, go to the passes tab and click this little button, and then down to the bottom click world position and click create, and then go up a bit and find object normal camera space and click create on here as well. This will put them in your scene passes little window, and you just got to click this little button here to include them with the render that we're about to do. What you need to do is set the render up just as you did the original. So we need to set up the frame range. In this one, our frames are 1 to 150. So if I just go back to the frame range parameters and put the end frame to 150, and we need to change the image format to OpenEXR. That's very important. So what we need to do then is just set up the images folder. If you know me, you'll know how to do this already. And it looks like we're good to go. So I like to, before I render anything with the batch render, just do a test frame. And what we're looking for is just a grayscale sort of render of the whole scene. As long as it renders here, we should be good to go. And that looks fine to me. So now we're just going to go up to the render tab and click batch render. I already did this, so I'm not going to render it right now, but you would usually just click batch render and close and wait for your files to appear in the folder. The render time on these is really short because there's no lights or textures. As you can see, the difference in time between these frames, that's about 7 frames in 1 minute, so less than 10 seconds per frame. Now once the render's complete, the next thing we need to do is export the camera. So if I click this little button here, it will select the camera, and I can just go File, Export Selection, and under File Type I'm just going to click FBX Export, which is a file type which Nuuk can read natively. So just give it a meaningful file name, something that you can easily remember. And once this is exported, we can then go over to Nuuk and start to assemble our scene and do our 2.5D relighting, which is actually much more simple than you'd think. So as always, the first thing I'm going to do in Nuuk is set up the project settings. So press S, and under full frame format I'm just going to select HD, which is the resolution which I worked in. So firstly I'm just going to bring in my original render of the interior. So there it is, an EXR sequence, and the colours look a little bit wrong because I believe I worked in sRGB colour space. Yep, that seems to have fixed the issue. So the next thing we need to do is bring in our render passes. So just dragging in the folder that contains the image sequence, I now have this grayscale render, and obviously this looks nothing like what we want it to, but as you can see it does contain the correct passes that we need. If you can't see these passes, then you've done something wrong. So the first thing we need to do is copy these passes into the original render. So I'm going to use a shuffle copy node, and this node always works by copying the 1 pipe into the 2 pipe. So pipe in the passes into the 1, and the 2 goes into our original render, so it's always 1 into 2. And this shuffle copy node looks a little bit daunting at first, but it's actually quite simple. So right here it says 1 in, change that to normal, and go over to the other RGBA and change this to normal as well. So that's basically copying the embedded render passes over to the original clip. And once you've done that, just tick these 3 diagonal boxes, and all that's doing is copying the RGB values over to the original pass. So once we've done this, we now need a second shuffle copy node to copy the world position pass, and we're going to do that in the exact same way. I'm going to pipe in the 1 and 2, the 2 now goes into the original shuffle copy node. We're doing the same thing again, except for this time we're using the world position pass instead. And just tick the same 3 boxes. As you can see, when we look through the shuffle copy node, we can now look at these passes, which are now embedded in the original footage. So using these passes, what we're going to do now is create a 3D representation of our scene in 3D using a point cloud. So just using a position to points node in Nuuk, we're just going to pipe that into the second shuffle copy, and within this we're going to change the surface point attribute to our world position pass and surface normal to our normals pass, which we've just copied in. And once you've done this, you'll notice your scene starts to lag a little bit. It will say that it's loading the point cloud, but what this is actually doing is building a 3D scene from these points that you can literally look at as if it was a 3D model. And as you can see, it looks a little bit weird. There are some holes in it. This is totally normal. It can only show you the pixels which the camera could see, so anything that was occluded will not be drawn in 3D, but you get this pretty nifty looking 3D representation of the scene. So the next thing we're going to do is start the relight. So create a relight node in Nuuk, and in the color tab, just drag that over to the shuffle copy as well. You don't need to connect that to the position to points. They're totally separate. We won't be connecting the position to points to anything. And in the relight, we're just going to change the normal vectors to our normal pass, and you guessed it, the point positions to the world position pass. And this actually doesn't really do anything that you can see at the moment, but the next thing we need to do is bring in our 3D camera. So if we just create a camera node, and in the node attributes, just click read from file and locate your camera. So it's just the FBX file which we saved out earlier. So if we click open on that and click yes on this little pop-up window, you'll notice that our camera is now in the scene just like it was in Maya, and if you scrub through, it will start to lag because it has to rebuild the point cloud every time it moves. So try not to skip through too much, because you only really need to look at it from one angle at the moment. But as you can see, it's pretty cool. You've got your whole 3D scene here. So next, create a light in the node graph, and then just pipe that into the relight node. But as you can see, if you look in 3D space, that light is already starting to do something. It's not affecting our output yet. So the next thing we need to do is just grab the light tab in the relight node and just pipe it into the light. And you'll see that there is a new tab appeared on the relight node. So just link that to your camera. And now we cannot see anything through our viewer. It's completely black. So we need to bring in a material. So if I just bring in a Phong material and pipe that into the material tab, you'll see it sort of recreated the scene but with a metallic sort of look, which is typical of a Phong texture. This obviously isn't right, so what we need to do now is just grab this little arrow from the Phong tag and just plug that into our shuffle copy. And you can see it is starting to affect the output now, but there is still this metallic look. So what we need to do is just turn down the specular level within the Phong attributes, and now we can start to adjust the light's parameters, and you'll notice that it does actually start to affect the scene in the way you would expect. So you're getting sort of 3D lighting with just 2D layers. But to see this better, just split your plane horizontally and create a new viewer. And this new viewer can just be piped directly into the position to points node. And you see it's just appeared at the top, the viewer 2, and drag that onto your new pane. And this is going to be our 3D window for controlling the position of the light. And we're doing this so we can see how the light is affecting the scene and move it in 3D at the same time. So on the left is what our output's going to look like, and on the right we can just sort of move the light around the 3D scene. So let's say we wanted this far corner to be a little bit lighter. We can now just move the light and position it, and it will affect the scene accordingly. And obviously you can still change the intensity to match your needs. So if we just move this intensity slider, you'll see that affecting the scene accordingly. We can also do some cool effects, so we can change the colour of the light afterwards as well. So I'm just going to create a blue light here, which is sort of creating a nice blue highlight on the edges of things. Any colour you want, but it just gives you a bit of creative freedom after you've rendered to be able to change things that you weren't quite happy with that maybe came out a little bit wrong. So I will just full screen my node graph here. So if you got confused along the way, you can just copy down exactly what I've done here. So I hope you've learnt something. Thanks once again for tuning into the YellowDog 3D tips, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!